Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Coaches Chat with the McFarland family head men's soccer coach, Chad Riley. My name is Brian Benedict, and I work in the athletics advancement offices. And really, before we begin, I just want to share a quick word of thanks of not only for everyone taking time today to join us, hopefully gain some valuable and insights into the program, but also an appreciation just for what everyone does on this call. We do this exclusively for our former soccer alumni, some of those who give back to the athletic programs in various ways, Rock Me Athletics Fund included. So not only for taking the time, but just everything you guys do through support and engagement. Hopefully this is one of the many ways we can express our gratitude and thanks for all that you guys do. So hopefully today will be a fun call. Again, thank you guys for joining. And in a moment here, I'll introduce both of these guys and I'll step aside. But first, Coach Chad Riley, which I'm sure many of you you don't already know personally or familiar with, but he's in his fourth season at the helm here for the soccer program, 2004 graduate himself, and earned 4 monograms as a member of the soccer team. Last year in particular was a historic season for you, Coach. 2021 season there where not only the first ACC championship you guys were able to capture for Notre Dame, but the second College Cup, appearance with a 14-5-5 record. So, Coach, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction.
Absolutely. And lastly here, Kyle Kraft, who is a 2014 alum, who was a part of the national championship team in 2013. Had a chance to play for Coach Riley there when he was assistant for a couple seasons. And Kyle not only is a native to Tulsa, Oklahoma, but he and his 2 brothers are owners of FC Tulsa, which compete in the USL Championship. So Kyle, welcome.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, I'll let you 2 take it from here. And thanks for joining us too.
Yeah. So we have a lot of topics to cover. We had some questions submitted at the beginning, but if you have any more, I think you can use the chat, I believe, to submit any questions along the way. So diving right in, Chad, why don't you just give us a recap of last season, what your feelings were? I mean, obviously, the end of year success, but just give us a brief overview of how you felt like it went.
Yeah. I thought it was, obviously ended. It's good. I think it worked out well that that you're hosting because you won the last game of the year, right? There's not many teams that do, so it gives us something to work towards as far as next year. But yeah, it was an amazing season for a lot of reasons. I think anytime you get a big trophy that you've never won before, I think that's always exciting, and I give the guys an unbelievable amount of credit for that. And then I think the way they played against the eventual national championship team that I thought we actually were better than in the end was really indicative to me, and like really a moment where, yeah, you want to win the game, you want to win the national championship for sure. But just to see kind of the growth of the team over the year was incredible, because it started like, so many seasons have kind of ups and downs for sure, but it started with some injuries in preseason where we had to kind of change our formation that we had been working on for a couple of years. And so it was really clunky the first few games. And then we were actually playing pretty well, but it was the worst. Bobby, our old coach, used to always say the hardest thing in soccer is to play well and lose. And that happens in soccer more than a lot of other sports. And I felt like we were doing that, but when the losses sort of start adding up a little bit, it's hard for everyone to believe you. And so what was cool is that I thought, through that, it really tested the kind of character and strength of the team overall. And then I think, with that, it was, instead of making excuses, they just took really hard looks at themselves. We did as a team, as the coaches, and then, they just started to grow. And then you saw the results start to pile up. And then, it is a team that I think really got as close as any team I've ever been around to its potential. So I think we're really proud and just proud of the way the team did it. And then I think the cool part to me is I every once in a while, the only way I know how to describe it is just when they're kind of like throwback teams where they're just a group of guys that like know that the season's going to end at some point, but they're going to work as hard as they can. They're going to enjoy being with one another. and they're going to love competing. And I think that team, I think the team really did that. So it was a wonderful season, a wonderful group of guys, and then, capped off by a few guys getting drafted, which was really, really cool. So all in all, a great time, even though we didn't we didn't get the big ring like you have. So
it's coming.
Yeah.
So, did you notice like any specific turning points? I mean, your defense in the ACC championship didn't allow a goal in 4 games. So, where do you credit that success? Was there like a specific moment where it clicked, or was it just like that hard work throughout? Just slowly gaining traction.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I do think there's like a few games where like I think our belief propelled to another level, like against Clemson at Clemson, the Pitt game at home where, your 2 teams that were started the year very, very well. And then I think defensively, I'm trying to think like if, maybe it was like almost Virginia Tech was probably the last game where, we gave up like a goal you really don't want to give up. And then it was a long period before we did again. And so I think what that did is just, in a way where I feel like the coaches and the players got exactly on the same page about like, hey, these are the elements that lead to getting shutouts. And if you get shutouts, you get the chance to win. And so I think just the team really embraced it, and so all of a sudden I think the team and the coaches were like just completely in sync, when generally we're going to be in sync. But I think there was just that extra level of like, oh, this isn't just coaches talking about like, hey, the second layer is where goals are going to get scored from. I think they took ownership of it. And then, kind of like we were talking about before starting this, I think then the just consistency of the defensive effort and the concentration just got to another level because I think it just the things we were trying to teach became real for him. So I think we gave up a really bad goal against Virginia Tech to lose the game in overtime, and then after that I felt like there was just another level of concentration and intensity in our defending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you also alluded to your 3 guys drafted. So what does that say about the program, where it's headed, and then how are you going to replace them on the team?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing because I think, like everything in the sport, especially in college sports in general, but in soccer in our country, like things are just changing, opportunities are different. And I think, we want to consistently be a place that you can come and develop to the best of your ability. And hopefully some of those guys' ability might be to be pro. So we want to still prove that this is a great pathway and a great preparation. And I think those guys getting drafted and then what they've done to get on their respective teams, I think shows that, this is a great place to kind of do both still. Although the opportunities in some ways for college players are becoming less and less, but we still want to be one of the teams that provides players to the next level. And for our guys, like sometimes I think they think of, Matt Beasler, Justin Morrow, maybe Harry and Dylan, who have played for a very long time, but I want the guys to be adventurous and know that like, hey, even if you go play for a couple of years, you're going to meet so many new people, you're going to learn so many things, and you're going to get these experiences that, you won't be able to hit pause when you're 40 like me and just say, hey, I'm going to go, kick a ball around a little bit. So anyway, I think that was a good moment for our team to have that and to show the current guys that like, okay, if I keep putting in the work, I'll get my opportunity as well. And then replacing, I think it's always interesting. Like you always, know like positionally where you'll have to replace, but I think that's one of the fun things about college soccer is just very rarely will you ever have your whole team coming back. Sometimes like, you might have 95% of the team back, and so there's just a few. Whereas this, there's some big holes to fill. I think we've got a good some guys that are, they've got to step up a little bit, but some good options. And then, I think the big thing you'll lose a little bit is just some of the experience when you have so many older guys that have been through, 4 years. And even just, I think the strength that those leaders and those seniors got kind of competing through the COVID pandemic, I think was a lot of like what gave them that backbone that they have now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, like one more kind of look back over this season is what were your favorite moments? And then how would you like with the squad as it is now, how do you think that kind of last year's success is, has it elevated their mood, their drive, kind of how has that success last year been integrated in the team for this spring?
Yeah, no, I think there's certainly some key moments that stick out. Like, I think I talked about that, the Clemson win down at Clemson when they'd won a bunch of games in a row, and it's a hard place to play. They were good. Obviously, they won the national championship, so I think that was a fun time. And then I think the other one that's hard is just that I don't think I'll ever forget the day of the ACC championship. It was a beautiful day. We scored. Dawson scores an amazing goal 5 minutes into the game, and you go through that entire tournament. Then after that, without conceding a goal is pretty special. And then really, like, every one of the NCAA tournament games, I think, are those games that are just burned in your mind because, and they're just, you know how it is. They're just special, right? There's different signs, it was just a special time of the year. But certainly, Pitt getting, winning that game in PKs and going to the Final Four for the second time in history, for the first time for me as a head coach, was very special. And then I think you see some of the pictures of the Final Four game, and at our kickoff, and the stadium's packed, and then just to watch our guys compete. Like, I got so many moments from that game where they just competed so well, even after giving up an unbelievably good goal from the Clemson kid from like 25 yards out, to like, it's so easy for it to crumble at that moment, and they didn't, and they kept playing, and I think they represented themselves really well. So I think those are the ones that really stick out, but then there is just the ones that, as you get further away from some of it, just the trips together, the airplane travel together. And, I think that stuff just is also kind of what maybe makes the game moments even more special.
Yeah. All right. So then transitioning to the spring, what are your biggest goals for this spring session?
Yeah, we always talk about the fall as like the competitive results driven part of our portion, like our year. And it's about like, how do we as a team come together to get the best results for the soccer team and soccer program. And so, that's at the end of the day, training sessions, things like that. You're obviously developing but you're developing maybe a slightly different way because results are important. Whereas in the spring, I think we call it still competitive, but it's the competitive kind of development part of our season. And so we really focus on like, how do we, like you talked about, the personnel is going to be a little bit different. What do we need to tweak within our system to like move the team forward a little bit? And then individually, how do we create good kind of action plans for each individual on the team to say like, all right, how do you take your game from where you are now up a level, whether that's becoming an All-American, whether it's, getting more minutes, becoming a starter, whether it's, how do you just get better? So we really focus on that. And then it is most of the games, sometimes we'll zero in maybe on the last game, we'll treat it a little bit like the fall when we play Indiana, where our rotations will be more similar to that. But the other games, the healthy guys, we sort of spread the minutes out and share the minutes just to see where people are and to give our players feedback for where they are too. So those are the main goals of just like the spring of like, hey, we're competing every day, but how do we develop our habits? How do we develop our, physical abilities, and then obviously soccer ability, both technically and tactically.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think as you laid out the goals there, I think it, speaks to why your team has spoken out against the 21st century model.
Yeah.
And I think they've done so, very well recently. There's been, some articles written up and stuff about their, what they've been saying. So can you speak to one, your thoughts on that, what that is also, and then two, your feelings on how the team is handling kind of speaking out in that way?
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, so the 21st century model, for those of that, a lot of people are familiar with it, but it's been around for probably 10 years now. And I think there's some really good aspects to it and some good thoughts behind it. I think, the execution might not be the most ideal, but essentially, in essence, you split the season into a fall portion and a spring portion, and in effect spread out the games a little bit more, which is great. I mean, getting rid of midweek games would be potentially nice, but I think that's the essence of it. So you have like a ramp up to the fall season. You'd end around Thanksgiving. You'd play roughly 10 games in the fall. And then you'd go into a period of training before finals, and then you would, come back basically when classes start again, have a kind of brief preseason, and then ramp up to play another roughly 10 games. And then the NCAA tournament would start sometime in May, and end at the end of May, sort of first week of June. And so, I think there's a lot of good rationale behind it. I think there's just, there's some hard things to get over. And I think, and then kind of going from there to where the guys are is interesting because, I always see myself as an educator. And I think as an educator, you don't just tell people what to think. You provide information and then help them, and it's up to them to sort of critically think through some of the problems. And so our guys got pretty inspired. We had a call with all the Division I coaches, and each coach was on there with a player to kind of listen in. So the group that's pushing this 21st century model kind of presented, showed kind of the model and talked about it a little bit. And so one of our players, Patty Burns, was in here with me. And so, from there, it was interesting being someone from Northern Ireland who obviously is new to college soccer or college sports in general. And his reaction pretty quickly was like, well, I just don't know if this is the best thing for us and for college sport, which I was a little bit surprised because I thought, a lot of internationals think it's crazy that, we do it this way. But so then we passed that information on to the team. And so for a week, they kind of talked about it, digested it, and really they all came to the same conclusion, which was surprising to me. Like I always thought it would be just a little split. Some guys might be for it, some guys might be against it, but they were pretty unified, and they had most of my concerns about it. They had kind of come to themselves. So we had a brief discussion, and then I basically just wanted them to have their voice heard. And so they got in touch with the administration, and then kind of with our media department. And then they continued to feel passionately about it until, they had their statements, and then they were on a podcast last night. So yeah, I've been very impressed with them. It's a very balanced group, the way they've approached it. And yeah, I've been really impressed because, like I said, for me, it wasn't my agenda to push one way or another. This was something for them, and they really have done, like you said, a great job of handling themselves and getting their points across.
Yeah. So moving to the competitive side of the spring, what games are upcoming? And then is there a chance for anybody to watch those games?
Unfortunately, we only have one game left. So anybody in the Indianapolis area. So next Friday, we'll play Indiana down there, hopefully outside if we can get some good weather. But yeah, we've had, that'll be our 5th game. So you're always allowed 5 games. You get 1 exemption for an international game, an alumni game, which hopefully we can get both of those things back in a normal year next year. We'll get Mexico back. They wanted to this year. It was just a little bit tough for them. I think just with World Cup qualifying schedules and everything were a little bit different. And then, the alumni event, hopefully we'll start to put a plug for talking to some alums about I think it would be a 10-year anniversary of your team that won the national championship, and then a 45-year anniversary of, it just made you feel old, didn't it?
Yeah, I know. That's harsh.
And then a 45-year anniversary of the program getting to varsity. So I think it'll be a great time to get a big celebration back. But we opened the spring season. We went down and we played FC Cincinnati's reserve team and drew with them, which was a good game. And then we played Michigan State and lost to them. Played NIU the next weekend, beat them, and then we just tied Western Michigan. And then we'll finish with Indiana. So it's been fun to get games in, and been fun. Like I just put a note out to the alums. It's been nice to be on alumni stadium for the last couple of weeks. So
yeah. So Dennis, forgive me if I get this wrong, Doughty asks if you could have any single item to improve the training and or conditioning experiences of your team, what would it be?
Yeah, I think for us right now, it's figuring out how to be, which can be done, but obviously everything has a budget. But our training fields have been replaced, but there's a big difference between our training field and our game field. The game field, I'd say, is at a 8 out of 10, and our training fields are at a 3 or 4. And it's hard to explain to non-soccer people. I think the consistency of me talking about it for the last 4 years, almost weekly, has helped that the ball's on the ground, and if it rolls slower or it's bumpier, we can't play. And so now, an owner of a club, I'm sure you're coach is always telling you like, hey, we need to be spending more money on the field, but it really like it's what we use every day. So I think for us, it's trying to figure out, how do we like the game field now we're playing early in the spring because we got a growth tarp for it. We got a, kind of special lawnmower, but kind of those things is I think the single thing that we could continue to improve to give our team a chance to develop. And then the other part is just it's also different when you go play in North Carolina, and their grass is half an inch, our grass is an inch and a half. Like it's just and you'll remember it from playing, right? So, so I think that's the thing. But it's then how do we do it, right? I was talking to somebody else, like how do we solve the problem? And I think there can be some technology, there can be some just some things that we can do. But I think that's kind of my focus right now as far as the needs, and then the wants. I think Alumni Stadium is just an amazing home for us, but I think it's when it was built and designed, there was quite a heavy amount of, like we talked about, heavy amount of NCAA rules where you could have bagels but no cream cheese and almonds but no almond butter or something like that. It's just to kind of revamp that a little bit to kind of meet the demands of the kind of current life of a student athlete.
All right, so looking ahead to the fall season, what's exciting you? How are the preparations coming for next fall?
Good. Yeah. I think we've got a good schedule. I think we're one game. We had one, we just lost a game recently, which is a little annoying, but so we've got one more game to fill. And I think we'll bring out, you don't do tournaments as much anymore. So that's kind of our Berticelli Memorial game will be Seattle University, which is cool. Another Catholic school coming out and good program. And they haven't come out for a few years. So they're going to come out to open, which will be a great way to start the season. And then we've got Indiana as well to start. So pretty typical schedule that we've had. And so, yeah, I think you're always excited about those opportunities. And it is, I think the fun part / scary part for us is always when it is like that unknown of like whether people take the jump or not. And you think, they do. Or so I think that's where we feel really excited about the team right now. My two assistant coaches are currently in Dallas watching some incoming guys at the Dallas Cup and the Generation Adidas Cup play, and the guys they've gotten a chance to watch have done really well. So that's exciting as well. And we're fortunate too that there's a summer program called Summer Bridge for student athletes that a few guys every year for different reasons get invited to by academic services and admission. So we've got 4 guys coming to that we'll get to know this summer, which we're excited about as well. And I think we're excited about these last couple of weeks of the spring, but yeah, the fall is, and I think the guys are ready to shift gears.
Yeah. So Trip Fuller asked, do you have any senior starters returning for their extra COVID?
Yeah, I saw that. That's exciting. So Chip used to train this guy that we do, actually, Ben Jacobello, who's turned into an amazing player. Unfortunately, he sprained his ankle pretty badly against Western Michigan, so he's hobbling around a little bit. But he's coming back and doing I forget the exact Mendoza Masters program he's doing, but he's doing a Mendoza Masters program, and then we have a couple other guys that are still kind of thinking about it. It's a tricky one because it's always enticing, but then it's the reality of getting a job, and so but Ben's the one that's certainly committed for right now, and then there's some others that we're talking about it with, and it's a little bit up to them because it is like whether grad school or a job.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. And Kevin Flanagan asks, what formation? Next year,
typically, and you'll remember, I've played a few in my time, but I had a long time to think and see the best ones. I think for us, the best one is a 4-4-2. Obviously a goalie. We always give the goalies a hard time; they never get included. But a goalie and a 4-4-2, and a flat midfield, and I think it gives us the best balance of pressuring and transitioning, and as well as possession shape. And I think it's the one that, when you really break down regular season versus tournament play, it's suited to sort of both. And then it's also one that I think creates these little partnerships better than a lot of systems, and so there's a lot of kind of help, whether it's the fullback and the winger, the center back and the center midfielder, the 2 strikers. And so I think it'll always look a little bit different at different times depending on the personnel, but I think that's the base. And I've played a 4-2-3-1, a 4-1-4-1, a 4-3-3. In 2019, we played a 3-4-3. So I just feel this is the best most adaptable and most effective system that I've played.
Yeah. As we look at recruiting, obviously great recruiting class this year, but what characteristics are you looking for in your recruiting class?
Yeah, I always, we have a slide when we're sort of going over recruits of like, this is probably what you have to be like to be successful. Like, I think they have to be serious about school, soccer, and getting better, right? I think that's what we, sort of that growth mindset, which doesn't have to manifest itself in just, someone that is always just thinking they need to get better, but that idea of like, they want to come here to challenge themselves, to grow. They don't want to just come here because we have nice buildings or a nice field or we're in the ACC. And so that's what we're looking for. And I think the way that kind of rounds out is like, we just want competitive people, because I think once you have that, they usually compete on the field and in the classroom. And then, I think they always see the world as a place that you can try to improve. And so I think then it comes out in the community as well. So, but in general, people that take a pretty serious approach to life, that want to do their best. And so we try to articulate, like, guys that come here and do that, they have a great time. If you just like soccer, probably not the place for you. At the same time, if you're like lukewarm on soccer and you just want to come here to go to school, and it's going to be a lot of soccer for you.
Yeah. And do you think that kind of your experience being a Notre Dame student athlete really impacts kind of that philosophy and how you are able to, talk to recruits in that way?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So Matthew Rose asked, what are the biggest challenges you're facing in recruiting, and how are you addressing those?
Yeah, I think, whether it's a, challenge or an opportunity, I think it's regardless of the time that we're in, is like just finding that right fit. Because I think that's when, like, you just know when you get it right, what an incredible transformational experience Notre Dame is for them. So I think that's something we always try to make sure do we show them what it is like daily at Notre Dame. And so giving them that experience, because I think when we get that fit right, it is amazing what, as we all know, it's just such a transformational experience, right? I didn't know a lot about Notre Dame before I decided to come here, but then, once I did, it's just been, it just feels like home in the way that's hard to explain. So I think finding that fit is hard, but I think it just takes work and takes conversations and getting to know people. And then also for us, it's like, trying to articulate what it is and what it isn't. And then I think the other hardest part is like in all of it, and you guys all have an academy there as well, as like predicting the future. I mean, at the end of the day, you're always trying to predict the future on players. And so that's the part that, I was fortunate that my mentor and mentors were good at, like, finding people that can continue to get better. But I think that's always the part that you try to get right as much as you can, but it is hard because you never know quite how people adapt as they move up levels in the game.
Yeah. I mean, speaking to kind of the recruiting side, I think I remember it's a very eye-opening experience talking to some other guys at other colleges. The one that sticks out to me was Michigan State, which is a good school, but their experience being athletes there was, especially on the academic front, was wildly different than kind of what was expected at Notre Dame, and kind of all of our experiences. And so I do think that, playing in Notre Dame is a little bit different than a lot of other, kind of top tier D1 schools. I'm sure there's others that are like that, but I think it's really important to recognize as a potential recruit and get right in the recruiting side of things too. And talking in terms of kind of the people you bring in, how do you define kind of your program's culture? And then, and how are you, or how are you or the team kind of maintain the culture that you're looking for?
Yeah, I do. I think it's something that we work on daily. And then, I think it was something that kind of probably a couple months in, like, obviously, I think, and I've been fortunate to be around the program for so long and know people from all different generations. And there's just such a common thread or threads through the program, right? I think the book, The Band of Brothers, the Brotherhood, those types of things. And so I think, while at the same time seeking excellence. And so, a couple months into the job, we did a retreat, and I think my challenge to the guys was, and we had one of our sports psychologists work with us, but basically say like, okay, I think we're passing down our culture and our tradition well, but like, how do we, put it into words to maybe make it a little more real? And so that's something we did, like I said, a couple months into whatever year it was, at 2018. And basically the guys came up with these values of excellence, commitment, togetherness, competitiveness, respect, and humility. And then, they tied that into a mission statement that was pretty powerful. And I think so, through that, and the mission statement is, we're a team who is in the pursuit of excellence through an absolute commitment to maintaining a togetherness, founded in competitiveness and grounded in respect and humility. And so, we let that kind of be our guide. And I think, in essence, it's about trying to be a great team, but also not sacrificing the togetherness and the team aspect of it, which I think, in professional sports, sometimes you have to do. And I don't think we make any big sacrifices, but there's things that like might make more sense from a scientific standpoint or efficiency standpoint. But if it's going to divide the team at all, I don't like to do it. And so I think, that's kind of the essence. And then we kind of retouched on that again. So after 4 years, we did a similar retreat actually out of the golf course again, and kind of touched on this just to make it real again in kind of these one-off settings. But then it's just something that we try to live daily. And then we just have this, if we have a bad practice, you're like, well, are we living up to excellence? Or, someone's skipping class, you're like, well, that doesn't sound like excellence. Or, somebody's not shaking someone's hand coming off the field, you're like, well, that's not togetherness, right? And so that's kind of what, I feel from my experience at Notre Dame, over the years. I think they did a wonderful job of putting it down. And now we just try to have it be our kind of guiding light as each team kind of, because as I tell the guys, this team will never exist again, right? People leave and people come in. So each year it's sort of this special. And so it is now like, what do the seniors leave behind? And then how do we welcome these new guys in and help them understand what we're all about?
Yeah. That's great. I mean, we've talked before, but when we bought the SC Tulsa, it was kind of last in every single metric in the USL, but both business and performance. So turning around a ship is much harder than keeping it sailing forward. So it's
exactly.
I think, and Notre Dame is where I learned all of that. How important that culture is, how important that team, touch points that you're always coming back to. But starting from scratch has been proven a little difficult for us. So it's
hard, right? It is.
It's keep it going. So kind of jumping off to, what are some things that you've learned from last year, whether it's success or at the beginning of the difficult times that, you're going to build upon for this next year and learn from for this next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where you like need a healthy amount of fear to drive you, and you have to be able to manage that. And so I think that's something that maybe some of the younger guys would be like, hey, these games, every game is going to be hard, right? I think that's the fun part about Division I soccer. So I think that's that part that kind of says like, hey, these things are important because of this, and we became the team that we were because of our approach on a daily basis. And so I think that's the thing you always want to start out with that foundation. And then I think to me, one of the things I learned was just going back to the formation. Like Bobby always had a thing, and I think it makes so much sense. And, I've had discussions with Brian, at Georgetown and stuff, who I love and is one of my close friends, but you do, I think you always want to be a team that has an identity that's clear and defined. And a lot of it is going to be with, kind of your formation, your roles and responsibilities. And then I think especially at a collegiate level, you do want to get it to the point where, the older guys are able to teach not only the culture and the ways and those things, but like actually like the little nuances, like how many people can you have imparting knowledge in little ways to make the thing kind of, that much better, right? And so I think whereas if you kind of flip-flop and have different identities or formations too much, I think in the end it's maybe you can do it in the pros if you've got the best team in the world, but I even think like Man City doesn't vary much from the way they play, Liverpool doesn't vary much. And so to me, it's about like, how do we find the Notre Dame way, given like you talked about, like, and Bobby would tell us, and it's the hardest school he coached at, and he coached at Dartmouth, Stanford, and Notre Dame. It's just a workload, right? With the weather, and so I think that's what we continue to look to improve, is like, how are we continuing to find that like Notre Dame way of being a great soccer team, and every year we get a little bit more information on that.
Yeah, so as I look at the college landscape, I think one of the things that I've noticed that has changed pretty dramatically from when I was playing was, how much the international recruiting and game has come in, and players have come into kind of the top levels of D1, and then also the transfer portal, I think, is also playing a much bigger role than it ever was 10 years ago when I was playing. So can you talk about that, how that's affecting college soccer as a whole, but also your program?
Yeah, I think in a little bit, like you said, when we work on the fit a lot, people will transfer. I think it's just the way it's going to be, but hopefully we have a little bit less of that, just because I think Notre Dame overall won't have quite the rates just as a school. But at the same time, sports obviously going to be magnified a little bit. So I think we're always prepared to deal with it, but I think the better we can be on the front end, like we talked about recruiting and finding like, okay, like, the injury test, or the, like, we want you to come to Notre Dame first. And I know it sounds a little idealistic, but the closer we get to that, I think then, we'll have a little bit more consistency with that. And then I think the international piece is interesting. Like, some people get bothered by it, and I think, it can be, but I think at the same time, like, for me, I think you always want your program to reflect the intentions of the school. And so I think some schools are going to have more internet, whatever it is. And so I think it's overall made the game much more competitive, because like when we were playing, Pittsburgh wasn't any good. No offense to anyone that was on that team, but they weren't, right? But now they're one of the best teams. Like Syracuse struggled for a long time, but now they're, and so I think, we'll always look everywhere for good players, because it's such a small amount of players that'll have the soccer ability and the academics to kind of make it here. And so we'll look everywhere. And I think it's always fun to have internationals as well. It's great for our team, but I don't think it'll be an avenue that we can rely on. I think the thing that we're taking a hard look at, that I am, is like, how do you, one of the other advantages that some of those teams like Pitt, like, their average age of their team was 23 and we're like 19, right? And so there's just a little bit of that, of like, is there a way to get guys more adult experience quicker? Or, even like we have a kid, and something maybe we'll sell to you guys at some point for but the Mitch Ferguson, who did a gap year and is playing for the Timbers second team, do we get a little older that way? And then I also do think like gap year kids in general come in with and they're pretty excited about being here, where sometimes kids that are on the treadmill of, senior year in high school and then freshman year in college, sometimes, they're just honestly a little bit worn out by the time they get here. So I do think we want to figure out, how do we continue to evolve and adapt, and what does that look like for us? I think some of that will depend on what happens with this 21st century model, because I think that's one way. You see football having players come in January, which I think is interesting. Like I don't think that'll be our way. I think it'll be more of a summer thing, but yeah, I think we're always looking to say, how do we keep competitive in whatever landscape that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. Well, Ted Schwartz's grandson just turned 6, and so he wants to get him on the radar. So I think recruiting is getting younger and younger. So
it is. We need to get the youngest.
He said he's looking really good. So
yeah, I'm sure he is. Tell him.
Sure.
I saw that. I was like, tell him to send us a schedule. We'll get out there whenever we can, depending on where he is. We'll take a look at him.
So one of the other big changes, I think, that probably everyone is aware of, is the NIL. So has that affected Notre Dame at all?
Yeah, I think it's affecting a lot of the sports quite a bit. I think it'll come into play more for us maybe in the future. I think initially my number one thing, so the way the law is crafted is that your internationals can't partake in it. So our number one worry is making sure our internationals didn't like do some deal and then get their student visa revoked. And then There's been a few guys, whether it was kind of local companies that, has given them apparel, or not like athletic apparel, like clothes or something like that. But by and large, not a lot has happened for our guys yet. I think the part that is more relevant for them right now is like individual training or summer camps, things like that they'll be able to do, which I think makes a lot of sense. And then from there, it's what is it'll be interesting to see where it goes, but I think right now it hasn't quite trickled down into our daily life yet.
Okay, and then how can men's soccer alums and friends of the program assist the program the most?
Yeah, and I think you said the word like programming. I mean, to me, like our biggest sell is that it's not a 4-year decision; it's a 40-year decision, and I think. I know I felt it as a player, now as a coach, and everything is just. I think the guys are so proud to be a part of something that's so much bigger. So I think there's a lot of practical ways, but I think just continuing to like come back to campus and go to practices and to, reach out when like you did, when you have got internships, and just to continue to take all those practical ways of just being like, okay, it's not just a team. It's not like, hey, I'm going here to play and try to be a pro. It's like, oh, hey, I'm coming into this sort of group of guys that have these shared experiences, and you want to help the next group have great experience as well. So I think that's the biggest practical way that's just like given so much power to the program of just like, okay, you're a part of a thing that's way bigger than just this team or this year or your 4 years. So I think that's the thing that is really, it's hard to place a value on.
Yeah. So as in terms of other seniors that are leaving, or I mean, just out of my curiosity, obviously the ESL Championship does not have a draft.
Yeah.
So are any other guys looking to continue their playing career, whether in non-draft, like not in the US, or what are you seeing anything there?
No, most of the guys are either going to a job or to a graduate program. I think they sort of, because it is interesting. It's even for some of the pros that'll be interesting. I think sometimes when you have the experience here, it can be so fulfilling that you're like, okay, I'm on to the next thing. And I think that's, with the other guys that are going on to the workforce or to different graduate programs. The rest of that group is sort of ready to make that transition.
Yeah. I mean, as somebody, I won my last competitive game ever, and
exactly,
like I'm calling it. I can't beat that. It's exactly. It's hard to.
You don't come back, like Tom Brady, right? You're like, what's he doing?
So I think, I mean, another kind of one of the things that I'm noticing in kind of the global sports world, and being a part of it from the professional side is just like how much younger everything is happening. I mean, in the US in particular, I think, the US has caught up a lot to Europe in terms of development, I think we still have a ways to go still, but, you see a lot more transfers, guys 16, 17, 18 years old coming out of academies in the US that are going to Europe and, having like real good success from at early ages. So how do you see do you see that trend like continuing? Do you think, or and how is that kind of affecting your like the college game?
No, I definitely do. I think, I think part of it's probably just the realization that these are good, hungry, young players, right? And it is. I think the cool part for the ones that especially are going over to Europe is they're getting in competitive games, because I think, it is one of these things of development in a competitive sport, not focusing on the result is challenging at some point. Like, it'll be interesting to see how the MLS's reserve league pans out. If they make it meaningful, I think it can be really helpful. If they don't, it's hard to say, because it's like, you don't start a business to lose money, right? You hope you eventually make money, or else it's not a business anymore. And so, I think the same thing with professional development, and you really don't know until you compete at whatever that next kind of tier is. And so I think it's awesome. I think it'll continue to develop. I think we'll, continue to maybe make some mistakes, because, it is, in some ways you just don't know. And sometimes people try to push their development along, and I just think that's usually where you make mistakes. And when kids aren't ready, they're not ready. And so the way it's manifested for us is I think you'll see, it's roughly around the top 20 players in the US every year will sign some sort of professional contract. I don't know whether it gets bigger. I think some of that will depend on the legislation that we can get passed and kind of in the NCAA or whatever is in charge of college sports at some point. Because I think, whether it's a hockey or a baseball, like I think there's some changes there that we can be integrated with that model. Because I think there's always going to be kids that are late bloomers and might not get the opportunity, but then all of a sudden they go. Like I was just reading an article about one of my players from Dartmouth that no one recruited, right? And now he's a starting center back for the Chicago Fire, but he was a 6'4" skinny kid from Maine, right? Like, but now and so I think that's where college will sort of filter, like, can we be, and maybe some of our guys are ending up more on the USL rosters, I think, and then proving themselves as a pro there before making that jump potentially, or maybe we have two professional leagues, first division leagues in the US and the USL and MLS are competing, but yeah, I think we'll still have a place. I think there's some things we can do to help kind of the younger players not lose that eligibility. Even if they sign a minimal contract as a professional. Yeah, I still see us being part of the landscape, even though, at the end of the day, like I always joke, Father Jenkins isn't calling me up asking me how many pros are going. He's, asking their guys getting their degrees and are they, having a valuable experience during their time. But yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting to be a US fan and, kind of talking about feeling old. Like I remember talking to the guys about the '94 World Cup, and this kid scored a goal. Patty scored a goal actually in practice that was very similar to a goal I remember being a young kid watching the '94 World Cup. So we, fortunately with YouTube, we found that goal and showed it to them, and they were, it looked like we were watching soccer from 100 years ago to them. So
yeah. I think college sports still has a really important part to play. I think it's actually going to be a benefit to U.S. soccer. Because it doesn't really exist in other sports or in other countries, in the way. And so I think like going fully to integrating with the global model is going to be worse for, more so just in the people development of our athletes, but I also, I think on the athletic side too. Obviously, like our guys, it's nice that all they have to focus on is training. But and hopefully this will change in 5 to 10 years. But like our facilities aren't as nice as Notre Dame's, and so the levels higher, but but there's real value, especially like in growing as a player and growing as a full person, to the to the college model, because at the end of the day, like you said, it's a business. And so like there are times where we kind of like, unfortunately, in order to maintain our competitiveness, we kind of do have to chew people up and spit them out. Like it's just the nature of professional sports, I think, which can be beneficial because then you can make good money doing it, but it's tough. I think especially as you kind of see player sales and stuff continue to increase. I think you've seen a massive increase in MLS just in the past 2 years, really, 3, 4, 5. The professional teams are going to start going younger and younger. You're seeing that in the USL now. And so it's, I think it's just like US soccer, I think, is just going through a massive turbulent time now. And hopefully we can still maintain kind of the best parts of it, and not go too overboard. Kind of that's my goal from the professional side. But the positive is that I think the professional, we have way more teams now.
Exactly.
A real living playing soccer in the US. Like almost all of our starters are making over $80,000 a year on 10-month contracts. So like you can make a real living that you can raise a family on in now 60 teams, 70 teams, 80 teams.
It's incredible, right?
Very different, times, a roster of 23 guys is the professional landscape in the US looks very, very different than kind of it was 10 years ago. So there's pros and cons, but
Yeah, for sure. No, it's exciting. I think to me, like the part where the nice part is like we're always going to be basically a free option for all the pro clubs. So I think there will always be. I mean, you look at the New England Revolution, and almost all of their starting, maybe 90% of them have significant college experience, and that's where I think, like you talked about, I think people undervalue the development of a human, and then I think also that idea of like learning how to win. Right. I think that's where people don't. There's these little habits that teams and players that win regularly have, and teams and players that don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other, teaching play like soccer, you can do drills all day and obviously work on your technique and stuff, but which is obviously valuable and necessary. But at the end of the day, like playing the game is really where you're going to develop. So getting good minutes in competitive games is the way that like any player is going to get better. So I think that's, having more opportunities to do that is always valuable, because I mean, the academy guys at the end of our bench are not getting in games. They're every day they're competing against good players, but they're not, that game experience is really valuable. So I think, obviously playing in college soccer has that level of competitiveness, but also getting good games and learning how to win. So I think that's pretty much all I had. If anybody has any other questions, or Chad, if you want to riff.
No, well, thank you. Yeah. No, it was fun to chat again. And like you said, I think the cool part, and it's so cool to have our alums just involved in pro soccer. It's really neat. And I guess my only question would be like, what do you see as like the overall goal for FC Tulsa?
I think the goal would be, my brothers and I are born and raised in Tulsa. And so the goal would be to create a community asset for it. Like we looked at Tulsa, it's, a decent sized city, a little bit over 1 million metro area. But didn't have real professional sports, minor league baseball, minor league hockey. And so, while we're second division, it's not minor league, right? Like we own our players. They're not like, they can't get called up. Like we have guys on multi-year contracts that if an MLS team wants them, then they can buy them from us. But, so it's a real professional team, with a lower budget, obviously, than the MLS teams. But so it's something that, we think that every major, if you want to be a major city, you have to have professional sports. It's just like one of the things you need. So our goal is to kind of get it to that. I think we are growing it. Ideally, we can get to 6,000, 7,000 people, 8,000 people coming out to every game. I think you see a city like Louisville, which is like a little bit bigger than us, but they've done a great job growing there. And now they have this new $90 million stadium that's amazing.
Beautiful,
They're drawing that kind of crowds every day or every game. They have a women's team in the NWSL. Ideally that's kind of the goal, right? Like it's something that people really support in the city, and is a professional team in the city that people can get behind. Oklahoma's much more of a not really a professional sports. Like the Thunder came in when I was in high school, so it's and that's the only professional sport or major league team. So I think a lot of people that are OU and OSU fans that so there's nothing in Tulsa that kind of everyone could get behind. So so that's kind of the goal for us. We're looking at building a stadium. So we're looking at sites for that. So that can also be used for concerts, everything. So it's really just like that economic development, making something that kind of the whole city can get behind. And I think, Tulsa's, the other kind of thing that's interesting is that, COVID is really, I think there's an opportunity for cities like Tulsa that kind of breaks I do still live in DC, so that, but I do think that they're, what had the big coastal cities had more of a stranglehold on kind of young talent, that I think doesn't exist in the way that used to. And so I think that there's real opportunity for cities like Tulsa, which I'm still, holds a very special place in my heart, that can start competing for that talent, and that it, really has an impact on the city as a whole. And again, it comes back to what are the things you need to compete for that talent, and I think professional sports is a must. So those are the goals for us. We bought it in 2019, which is not the exact right time you want to be buying live event businesses. But I think some of the turnaround has been slower, but we've like quadrupled our season ticket base with, we're massively, we're doing much better than kind of we were whenever we took over. So we're seeing the progress, I think. And I think 5-10 years, who knows what it's going to be. So excited for the future. If anybody wants to follow us on Instagram to see Tulsa, I'll throw the plug out there. You can buy merch if you want, even if you're not from Tulsa. So it's been fun. It's been a great. I didn't expect to get back into the soccer world, but it's been a really fun project. So yeah,
it's really cool. No, thanks. That's awesome. Excited to watch it grow.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. See you all next time.
Yeah. Thanks, Kyle.
Great. All right. See ya.